Hey everyone, let's talk about this next lesson we got going on here. Equations in y equals mx form. Now, this particular video is just basically intended to show you that this concept is not like as complicated as it looks. All right, the book throws out a bunch of definitions and words that are in bold print that look important and everything, and they introduce this concept of something called direct variation. So let me just kind of sort of debunk and tell you what direct variation is. What direct variation is in simple terms, all right, is it is when you have a relationship between something that is constant. Okay, it's a constant relationship. If you graphed it, it would make a straight line, so it's linear. And we'll talk a little more about that as the chapter goes on. But it's just that you can count on something to be the same. So a real good, easy example of direct variation is if you go to the movies. So supposing you go to the movies and you know that, okay, you went with two people 1 week and supposing tickets cost $18, right? And then, so if somebody said to you, okay, well, what if 5 people want to go? Well, what would you do? Well, you would take that $18 and you would say, well, that $18 was for 2 people, right? So you would say it was $18 for 2 people. And then you would figure out, okay, well, that means if I break it down, it's $9 a person. And then if you want to figure out what it costs for 5 people, you would multiply 9 times 5 and determine that it would cost $45 for 5 people to go. That is a basic direct variation equation. We just didn't use any numbers or letters or words or anything fancy. We just did it. So I think if you can just sort of wrap your head around this and figure out the form they want you to put this in, this shouldn't be that difficult. So the book says you've got this linear relationship, which I kind of explained. Direct variation when the ratio of y to x is a constant, so that's the rate we're talking about. And we say y varies directly with x. And so in the example I gave you, my m, the constant of variation, would have been the cost of the ticket. So that would have been the $9. The x would have been the number of people, right, going. And then the y would be your final cost, right? How much it costs. So nothing too complicated. And in the book, they refer to the m in this equation as constant of proportionality or constant of variation. I'm just pretty much going to usually call it the rate. And later on, you know, you're going to, when we start looking at equations, the y equals mx plus b equation, they're going to call that the slope. Okay, so slope is a kind of rate. Constant of variation is another word for rate. Constant of proportionality is another name for rate. It just means that this thing goes up proportionally, and it doesn't change. So let's kind of look at some examples here. The amount of money Robin earns while babysitting varies directly with the time, as shown in the graph. Determine the amount that Robin earns per hour. Now, all you got to do for this is just basically pick a point on the graph where you can get 2 clean points. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm saying, okay, well, at 2 hours, it looks like she earns $15, right? So if I take that, I say, well, and it's always y over x when you're figuring this out. So the amount of money she made, all right? So if I'm looking at this, if I make this into a slope triangle, right? Amount of money, my y is 15 and my x is 2. 1 up 2 goes up 15. So my y would be 15. My x, the time is 2. So you got $15 over 2 hours, right? Sorry, I guess you don't need that there. 15 divided by 2 is 7.5, and that would be $7.5 per hour. So we would call that $7.50. $7.50 per hour and that's how much Robin earns per hour. Now, if I were going to put that into an equation to figure out like how much money she would make, think about what you would do. If I said, well, Robin worked 20 hours last weekend babysitting, that would be a lot, right? But what you would do is you would just take the amount and you would multiply it by that. So you're actually putting it in to find the total amount of money, which would be her Y. Your M would be your rate, your 7.5, because we don't need that 0. It's just kind of unnecessary. And then times your X. And your X would be, number of hours. And then that's how you would figure that out. So your direct variation equation would just be Y equals 7.5X. And this Y will wind up telling you how much money she makes depending upon how many hours she works. All right? So it's really not as complicated as it looks. And it's something that you probably do in your head, right? You could figure it out. So let's look at this last thing here. 2 minutes after a skydiver opens his parachute, he has descended 1,900 feet. After 5 minutes, he descended 4,750 feet. If the distance varies directly with the time, at what rate is the skydiver moving? All right, so it says 2 minutes after he opens his parachute. All right, so if we look at this, all right, we're looking at a period of time from 2 minutes, right, to 5 minutes, okay? And at 2 minutes, right, so 2 minutes, he's 1,900 feet, right? 5 minutes, it's gone 4,750 feet, right? And so if you're figuring out a rate, think about this, is it going to be feet per minute, or is it going to be minute per feet? Well, minute per feet doesn't really make any sense. Feet per minute makes sense. It's how many feet does he fall in 1 minute, right? So you would just figure out what's the difference here. So this is literally going to be our Y, right? This is going to be our Y. It's going to be the distance, and then our X is going to be the time. All right, so you would just do 4,750 over or minus 1,900 to figure out what that is, over 5 minus 2. So what that will tell you is how far this person went in the span of 3 minutes. And so if I set up a real quick little subtraction algorithm here, right? I get 5, 8. So I get 2850 divided by 3, right? And I'm going to take that and I'm going to divide that. And I know that 3 goes into 2,700. That would be, what, 900 times, right? Then you have 150 left over, and 3 goes into 50 times. So it would be 950 feet per minute is how fast the skydiver is going. So if you were going to figure out where he was going to be after a certain amount of time, you would just say Y equals, 950 times X, and that will tell you exactly at what point where is he at. So if you did it after 2 minutes, you would get this 1,900 because of 950 times 2. If you did it after 5, you'd get your 4,750. If you did it after 10, you'd get 9,500. So this, obviously, most skydivers don't fall at a constant rate, but in this situation, he does. So that's kind of what we're looking at. These are very common sense. So just don't make them too complicated, and don't let the wording throw you off for what's being asked of you. All right, thanks.